listening to episode 3 of Jack the Last, the podcast, where we recap the HBO BBC series Gentleman Jack and generally have a gay old time. I'm Carrie.
And I'm Kelsey.
And welcome to the show. Episode 3. Here we are. Things are heating up. I mean, they're pretty heated before, but yeah, it's getting hotter and hotter.
It's getting hot in here. Let's not get a copyright strike.
Yeah. So we open the episode, pretty close to where we leave off, in the previous one. I don't know, they're kind of doing True Blood rules. I kind of like it, where it's like things immediately pick up right where you left off. Which, I mean, obviously time will stretch out over the course of the series, especially towards the back half of the season. But I just think it's super interesting that right now things are being played so tightly in a span of time. We open with Anne Walker's relatives arriving and seeing her and Lister there. I wrote in my notes, clearly having a kiki and carrying on. And so, they arrive and are visibly disappointed that she's there, which I thought was super interesting because neither of them seem to have a super negative opinion of Anne Lister or any reason to.
There's at this point in time rumors about what Anne Lister really does, and now they're getting close to their family member. I put that in quotation marks because it's like they're her family, but they're just more nosy than anything. I wouldn't say it's more of like a familial bond. But it's some really actually good foreshadowing if you know more of the story, what happens after they get married. It's some really brilliant foreshadowing in the book, at the end of the book that Anne Choma wrote. She talks about how when her and Anne Walker got married, when Anne Walker's family would come to visit, they'd basically just ignore Anne Lister, even though she'd be sitting right there. So to me, it's like some gentle, nerdy foreshadowing if you know the whole story. That's what I liked about it. Because they did when her family came to visit at Shibden, they just ignored Anne Lister and wouldn't even acknowledge her existence.
Ugh, that's just so trash. We'll get there, I'm sure in season 2. But the thing in this moment I thought was so interesting, especially based off of what we talked about in episode 2, where her cousin Catherine can't quite articulate why you're not supposed to leave women alone with Anne Lister. Where she's like, she's, can't be trusted with women. And Anne Walker pushes her on it. It's like, what do you mean? She's like, I don't know. She's just like a man. And then Anne is like, I'm not going to just leave it there. So it was just very interesting that it's like, you wonder how much exactly they do know. I feel like her older relative definitely knows what she suspects, whereas Catherine seems to be living a sort of as sheltered existence as Anne, and it's just I don't know, but I just know we're not supposed to like her. I thought that was super interesting.
I love Anne Lister knows what they're trying to do, but is just sitting there she flirts with Delia at the end.
She does.
That scene where she's
yeah. I'm the audacity. Look, let me tell you, that is BDE to be you do favor your mother, your sister. Her sister. It's
her sister, her sister's Catherine also.
Yes, it is. You do favor your sister around the lips. Of all the places. Yeah. But it is she does, but prior to her kind of I don't know, screw you flirtation sort of thing, she's very affable and amiable, and she tries to be very project something very above board, if that makes sense, where she's just very amiable and making small talk and talking even more than Anne Walker.
Yeah.
In that interaction,
she Michelle Obama them.
Kill them with kindness.
She Michelle Obama. Yeah, she when they go low, we go high.
Yeah. Yeah, 100%. And also because she's used to navigating this before, you get the feeling of someone doesn't like me, they're suspicious of me, I'm just going to be so freaking nice that even if you don't trust it, you don't have a leg to stand on. You can't convince other people that I'm up to no good. So we go from there, jump back to Shibden with John wanting to marry Eugenie for no reason other than she's super hot, and kind of seeing his ability to like, oh, I can help you, you can help me.
He needs a mother for his kids.
100%. He needs a mother for his kids, but also he's genuinely attracted to her. I mean, which to be fair, the actress who plays her is gorgeous. And the point that it's meant to underscore is like, oh, it's super easy for straight people to get married for literally any reason. You know, this is like their shotgun wedding. It's not even his baby, and he's about to have a shotgun wedding.
If you know the guy that plays John Booth, I mean, he was also in Downton Abbey and also played a hopeless lover because remember the William Daisy storyline? Oh. I can't catch a break. He's always into women that don't really want anything to do with him.
Oh, he's like, oh, Daisy. Or I can't do the accent. The northern, it was like Daisy.
The Yorkshire accent.
Yeah. Oh, he was so sweet. He's like typecast as a good guy. This is very sweet.
The kind of hapless.
Yeah.
Hapless guy.
Kind of like not the cool guy, but not like so, like not creepy and not like so uncool that you're like, ugh, but just like, oh.
Yeah, he doesn't give me creepy vibes. I think everything he
shoots for girls out of his league. Or girls who just have no interest in them. And so they approached John and Eugenie approached Marian to be like, can you kind of be our go-between? Oh, no, wait. I skipped ahead where he does all this build-up.
And you skipped the most important scene.
I know. Where he goes to courtingly and is like, will you propose to Eugenie on my behalf? Because I surely can't do it. I don't speak any French. And she's like, oh, well, okay, I guess. And so she does it. And then Eugenie, and so there's like this long pause and Eugenie just goes, oui. And he's like, oh, and he's like so overjoyed. I feel so bad for him, like the level of overjoyed he is.
Yeah.
And then they cut.
She's just so matter of fact, like, okay, what else?
Yeah, she's like 100%. This is my only way out of this situation of being secretly pregnant. And, you know, and accordingly does warn him. It's like, if Ann Lister works it out, you'll both be that, you know, she's pregnant before she's married. You're both going to be sacked. And it's like, you know, he has like a huge family of kids to support, plus potentially one more. So it's like, you know, kind of demonstrates like how, you know, far he's willing to go, but also in the age before like super good, you know, gynecological care. They're just like, babies come early all the time. Oh, you know, anything is possible. You know, it's like you can just kind of say whatever about conception dates. And so they were just going to be like, yeah, fine, whatever. She probably won't care, which realistically, I don't think Anne would super care. I don't know. As long as they were all sorted. I think she was just
more mad about them keeping it from her than anything.
Yeah, really. It was
versus
more like
the actual situation.
Yeah, 100%. Because she, like, when she finds out later in the series, spoiler alert, that this almost happened, she's like, oh, well, you know, that was nice of you. She's like begrudgingly like, this is a nice thing for you to do, but you deserve better than Eugenie, which I thought was so funny. But true, he definitely does. So she's like, well, Marian's like, sure, if you want to get married, go for it. But, you know, do you speak any French? And John just goes, oui. And then they cut away and it's so good. I will say that the downstairs stuff that isn't dealing with Bad Dad Sowden and his kids is so funny. The downstairs world of
it really adds like, I mean, there's a lot of levity in this show. It's not even as like dramatic as the next several episodes get. Like there's still an aspect of levity too that I really appreciate.
Oh, absolutely. So we move ahead to in my notes I call it Love Shack. Baby, Love Shack. There we go. The Love Chaumière. So yeah, but also
the Chaumière d'Amour. The Love Chaumière.
Ooh, I love that. Chaumière de my Chaumière d'Amour. Nope. Anyway, that's nothing. So we cut to that. We cut to the Lesbianns on the way to the Chaumière. I noticed Ann Lister wearing blue for the first time in the series.
Yeah, she does wear like adjacent shades.
She does. That are dark.
Of like black.
But I noticed it looked the closest thing we get to her wedding, spoiler alert, wedding outfit a bit early. And I was like, oh, that's interesting.
But I feel like the wedding outfit though was
It's much nicer.
More blue than everything else. Yeah, it was like, this is like very dark navy blue, where if it was like under the wrong light, you might think it's black.
Right.
You know
but
what I'm saying?
I liked it as a costume detail of like her first starting to actually fall for this person. And so we're seeing the colors start to lighten a little bit.
Yeah.
But
when we go to that really nice handheld type movement too, because we're in like intimate moment between them.
Yeah. And we do hear, so as the Anns are walking to the Chaumière, and Walker is kind of babbling a little bit. It was like, oh, I have people coming. I need to put them off. But it for us to travel, but it would be super inconvenient, and the dates have all been arranged. Do you mind? And like Ann Lister's like, sure, whatever. You know, do what you got to do, baby. And is not stressed by this at all, but we will come to discover that who Ann is talking about is the Ainsworths. Her friend, what's her friend's first name?
We find out about next episode.
Yeah, which we do learn the backstory of, which is super uncool and super sad. But in that moment, we're just like, oh, she's just babbling the way that Ann Walker does when she's nervous about letting Ann Lister down.
Yeah.
And so Ann Lister's like, yeah, it's fine, we'll go.
Yeah, just a little fun fact. Actually, in the book and in reality, Ann Lister told Ann Walker that she built the Chaumière for her. That's not true. She just told her that, you know, to like charm her. But she told her the Chaumière was like built for her. Yeah.
That's so funny and so bad. Look, we'll get to other things in this episode where Ann Lister definitely lies to Ann Walker about, which makes you wonder, like, however long they live together, if she ever comes clean to her, or if she just like, oh baby, I built this for you. She definitely remodeled it for her, definitely renovated it to make it, and chipped in to make it.
But the Chaumière was like recently constructed when she took her there.
And so she just
said it was like within the same frame of time that they had met and were like seeing each other. So she just said it was for her, that she built it for her. It just happened to line up perfectly with when they started like hanging out.
All of it. She's such a player. Ugh. Ann Lister is so good at this game, but also kind of the worst.
Yeah.
Oh man. Oh, she's such a player. And so then they go inside, and it's so adorable that Ann Walker awkwardly is like, asks Ann Lister to kiss her, which because she brings up again, you know, oh, what you asked me about last time, you know, if you were to, and this I think echoes the scene on the hill in the finale where she can't say outright, I want you to do this or do this for me, but she'll be like, if you were to ask me, I wouldn't, you know, it was like, I wouldn't hate it, you know, if you kissed me, you know, sort of thing. She has to do this very roundabout way, which I personally found very relatable. Anytime I'm bringing up a conversation where it involves a certain level of vulnerability with my significant other, it's very weird, like roundabout, you know. But also, I like that she doesn't do the thing where she brings it up as a joke just to see how it goes. Like for me, it's either like I just go, you know, the thing that we, you know, talked about. This is basically when I came out to my now girlfriend. I don't know if I told you that. I literally, we'd come out of seeing Mamma Mia's 10-year anniversary re-release in cinemas. I must have told you this. And
I don't think so.
Which makes it even funny. So, and then our friend that we saw it with walked home, and literally, and she'd come out to me, and my girlfriend had come out to me like a couple weeks before. And I was like, the thing you said when we were having drinks with our other friend, and I truthfully like burst into tears because I like could not even say what it was. I was just like, I'm like you too. I think I'm like that too. I couldn't even say bye. I could not bring myself. And it was the sort of thing where it's like, you know, you don't necessarily worry because like you feel safe enough with this person to know you're not going to be rejected. And I don't think Anne is afraid of being rejected, but it's never having asked for this before, even from a guy. It sounds like never having not
female,
but asked for a kiss, you know?
Yeah. Well, female sexual agency was not like a thing at all back then. You know, Ann
not
Lister's
at
very
all.
much like an anomaly
Yeah, she taught herself
in
that.
terms
She
of
had
being
to.
forward.
Yeah.
Yeah, she had to. But there's a really beautiful, after that line in the script, two things. It was like, I think this was my first time watching the show in order. Like, I think I binge watched episode 1 and 2, and then I watched 3 when it aired. And I remember seeing like that moment where she gets up and closes the window. I was like, man, because I've been there where you're like, I mean, I've not, you know me, but just that detail and that always looking over your shoulder type stuff, that's not changed really. I mean, it has in a way, and then it hasn't. I was like, that is so relatable in this attention to detail, because you know every other show would never do that. They never, the shows
Game
when it
of
comes
Thrones,
to sex,
they do
romance,
not care.
they
Yeah.
never pay attention to outside context, and that was
It's
such
true,
a
people don't
deliberate
have
detail.
to.
I was like, I have so much respect for this show now.
Yeah, that's the thing. It's very much, even like I live in New York City, you know, one of the gayest places on this earth.
Yeah.
And I'm still very mindful, you know, where I show PDA, and, you know, when I'm, and there are moments that, you know, in certain situations, I've been introduced as a friend and I introduce her as a friend, you know, within utter, like when it comes to a situation where it's utter strangers, you know, and it's the sort of things like you have to be always mindful of your surroundings, and knowing that, especially if you are, you know, if you don't know how someone is going to react, and you don't, and even if you live in a fairly open-minded place, not every single person is that way, you know, and especially if you are in need of like a service, or, you know, signing some, you know, before anything is like confirmed, you don't know how it's going to go. So you always have to be very, it's a kind of self, censorship a little bit. And it's definitely,
and it's funny. I'm
realistic.
Yeah, it's funny. I'm looking at the script right now because I wanted to read the action line for this scene.
Go for it.
But this isn't. It's not even the window where she closed. It's not even scripted. So that was added on set. So that to me is just like a very much like an appreciation of detail. Whoever made that decision on set, and I want to see if the other ones were scripted too. But that was just a really good detail. But
it's probably a directorial.
I think the action line in the script. Yeah. The action line in the script, I think, is really beautiful for their first kiss. So it's after Ann Lister says, really, you know, you really want me to kiss you. It says, Anne nods. Anne gets up from tending the fire and goes to sit beside Anne. Increment by delicate increment, they end up kissing. It's so tender, so gentle. From the first tentative peck, it quickly becomes more and more passionate. Now it's happening. It's so clearly, so unambiguously what they both want, and Anne Walker feels more alive, in parentheses aroused, than she's ever felt before. So I know in the scene we only get like really what is a peck, and then them kind of like
going for it,
in love, smiling at each other. But the script was they were supposed to just keep going. I think they probably did on set, but they cut, you know.
But also, I think
love the action line so much.
I think it saves, but also I like that tentativeness, because like this is Anne Walker's first kiss ever. You know, and to us, obviously, social mores are different now. But you know, at 29, you know, we're both in our late 20s, so it's the sort of thing where it's like all of that, like, you know, tension, any romantic tension she's had in her life with anyone, like, you know, a lifetime of that is being put into this first, and she wouldn't, you know, it'd be her first kiss, and so you would, you know, not be the most confident in it. You know what I mean? So it's the sort of thing. I personally liked it. I like that sort of timidity that Anne Walker kind of has in that moment, but allows it for that passion later. I liked seeing that in a different scene. You know what I mean? Where it's like, okay, she's confident in herself now and what exactly she wants. You know, in the next scene where they go into a different room, she's like, would you like to come for and Ann Lister is like, oh, will you come by and meet my aunt tomorrow? Which is entirely so that later she can ask her aunt what she thinks of her and explain her idea to become life partners with her. So she's running her by her aunt, and then Anne Walker goes, oh, would you like to afterwards come back to my place for dinner? And then she walks past her servants and they walk into the room, and then she pushes the door behind her and goes, and then stay all night. and then they go for it.
Yeah.
And I was like, 0 to 80, ma'am. Yes. But
I know. I wrote down, I was like, power bottom Anne makes her first appearance.
No, truthfully, she knows, she's a woman who knows exactly what she wants, but it's so interesting that for so long in her life, she's not even allowed herself to really think about it, because she and has always had people dictating that for her. And here we see that bit of fire that, you know, that Ann Lister brings out in her, that being in love brings out in you, you know, doing things that, behaving in ways that like, you don't necessarily think of as yourself, but it's a sense of empowerment. You know what I mean? Not necessarily in a bad way where she's losing herself. She's like becoming more authoritative.
It's funny, in the script right after she says stay all night, it says her meaning is clear from her manner. Bed, sex. Ann Lister is amazed by how fast it's all happening, but it all feels right. She's aware that she's awoken something powerful in Ann Walker.
Thirst.
Yeah.
But I will say I do
Oh,
go for it.
So there's, after this, I gotta tell you about this. All right, so there is a deleted scene that's cut, which really, you know, we were talking about like player Ann Lister. So this in the script is right after that, where you know, they kiss up against the door, and again another great unscripted moment of Ann Lister trying to like checking the window to make sure nobody's watching. Again, fantastic. But after that, in the original script, the next scene, it says Anne's walking home in the dark, really dark and proper country silence, because she's, I guess, been making out with Ann Walker for a while.
Till 10 p.m.
Anne speaks straight to us. Anne speaks straight to us, so it's one of those breaking the fourth wall moments. So she says, so I may try her, or rather let her try me, and go to what lengths? I can see that if I stay all night, I shall have as much of her as I am able to take. I never dreamt of her being such a passionate little person. I just hope that I, nudge, nudge, wink, wink, can do enough for her.
Wow. When we got this cut, why? That would be so fun. Could you imagine Suranne Jones just like making like a meal of that monologue? Not in a bad way.
It's in
not
the
like
shooting scripts. They probably,
but like in a good way.
It's in the shooting scripts. So I think they did film it. They just probably cut it.
Ugh, the DVD release. It better be there.
Somebody said like a lot of these didn't make it because the DVD's out in like
the UK,
England. So the next scene, we come home, Marian and Anne like have like a little fight, and Anne shuts the door in Marian's face, which is so good. Gemma Whelan, man, is like a comedic genius.
Oh, so good.
She's so good.
But she is like legitimately worried about her. She's like, oh, it's 10 p.m., you know, where people, I guess, I don't know, go to bed at like 7 o'clock? Who knows?
I think they probably went, actually, I don't know, because dinner was late back then, so I think it was 10 o'clock when they went to bed, but it was when they went to bed. You shouldn't be just coming home at 10 o'clock.
Exactly, especially as a woman, alone, unaccompanied. And, you know, Marian's a worrier. I think she's a Virgo.
Probs.
She worries and loves like a Virgo is what I wrote in my note. But yes, please continue.
But then she goes upstairs and talks to Aunt Anne about, because Marian's also pissed because she had to call Dr. Kenny because Aunt Anne's stomach is acting up again.
Ulcers,
So Anne's worried about Aunt Anne, and she goes upstairs and they, you know, she tells her about Ann Walker, but I love this like coded way in which they speak to one another, where Aunt Anne knows what's going on. She knows what Anne's talking about. She's not dumb, but she never goes out and said like, I made out with Ann Walker today, but she says everything to insinuate that. And that she's like in this new relationship and she's excited about it. But it's this really beautiful, like coded way that they speak to one another. It's so good. And then Aunt Anne being concerned for her because she is going for a woman that has a lot of familial connections in the town. And then bring up my favorite line from the episode, which it was probably the first moment. Like I've had moments where I was like, oh, this is so relatable. But when Ann Lister said that line about nature played a challenging trick on me, where she's talking about how she is kind of at war with her sex and how she basically is not, you know, she doesn't identify with her gender assigned at birth, really. And like I relate to that a lot as somebody that like is not really within like the gender binary. So I just love that quote so much. I don't have the whole thing written out, but it's just so good. And there's the end, she ends with saying that you have to take risks to be happy. And that whole quote, I was like, okay, I like see myself in this character. That was my first like, okay, this is like they're having female masculinity is not really explored that much in media. So this is like the first time I've really seen female masculinity explored in like an authentic way.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think I do have the actual dialogue bit. It's like, if we want to be happy, we have to risk getting hurt, said by Anne. And Auntie Anne is like, this is Halifax. They don't mince words. And then she goes, they can't touch me. And I'm like, that like sort of feeling of, I mean, a little bit of like a feeling of in the invulnerability that comes when you're like really have a lot of feelings for someone of like, like I think about that scene in Elf where Will Ferrell's like, I'm in love, and I don't care who knows it. But I think more so than that, I think it's like a bit of a self-determination thing where it's like, they can't touch me. It's like, I won't let it get to me. But obviously, to a certain degree, it does, as we see in the scenes where, in the previous episode where the child like misgenders her purely in like a naive moment, not in a way of mean-spiritedness at all. Which we'll also get to with Bad Dad Sowden later in this episode. But it's the sort of thing where it's like, I won't let this get to me. I'm adamant that it won't. I like it, sort of the dual meaning in those words. And I like it it is also an interesting moment where, as you were talking about her, how she performs her gender and the sort of thing where it's like frustrating in that she, of this time period has, regardless of her sexuality, is operating very much like a man in the sense that like she manages the property. It is in her name. She, has collected the rents. Like she does the work of a man, and likes the aesthetics of what is identified as masculinity in that time. You know what I mean? Like there were not like variations there was not like butch culture, femme culture, genderqueer, non-binary. Like there was nothing like you were a woman and you dressed like X, and if you are a man, you dress like Y. And obviously the way in which she styled in the show, and as we know from history and from the diaries, that she styled herself as much in between as she could, as was, to her personal taste, but also to what was available to her so that she could still function in society without fully doing what would be considered cross-dressing. But I just think, I think it's absolutely, because it's a thing that I like that your interpretation of the line is like a bit different. And obviously it like hits you differently. Which I thought for me, it was like, I feel, not that she necessarily feels like a man, but she like, you know what I mean? She like operates in the way in which her, like, she like is like, I am attracted to women. This is a thing that a man did. Like that interpretation of like what she would have been fed at the time, right? Through religion, through society.
Being
it's
like, interesting you say that because in the next episode, there's a deleted scene. Maybe it's not the next episode. I think it's episode 5 when that Miss Parkhill's there. There's a deleted scene that's in the script where Anne is talking with George Cuvier about the fact that she doesn't feel like she fits in either gender. So she did have a gender dysmorphia, but we'll get into that in episode 5, I think.
Yeah, definitely.
So there's a really great deleted scene with her in Paris with George Cuvier. It's a flashback. They didn't add to the show, but it's really good.
Yeah. Oh, that's so interesting. Cause I think the initial thing that was put outside her house before the historical like land, when it achieved landmark status, however long ago that was, it said like, oh, so what a pioneering like individual, like something in the realm of like, they said like gender nonconformity or something like that. But they like, we're not acknowledging her lesbianism or her as like a queer woman in terms of sexual orientation, but they acknowledge her, like,
it didn't erase her gender, but erased her queerness. Yeah,
which I thought was super.
Which, I mean, all like, kind of goes into.
I'm like, one of these things is like, and also like you think about like Sam Smith coming out as like non-binary and using they them pronouns now and stuff, things of that nature. Where it's like we as a society are like, still seeing backlash about like pronouns and things like that. Whereas, not that like gay rights are solved by any means, you know, but it's the sort of thing where it's like, that's interesting that her gender nonconformity is was a thing that the Historical Society thought was easier to acknowledge or the better thing to acknowledge versus like the gayness. You know what I mean? I just thought that was like really interesting.
Yeah,
I don't have any commentary other than like, that's surprising to me that that would be the thing that they felt they had better language for, you know?
To the fact that she clearly liked to have sex with women.
Yeah, because like, you know, I feel like even scholars today would not feel 100% comfortable saying like, oh, you know, she calling her for like a mask of center woman versus someone who wanted to be trans. You know what I mean? Trans. You know what I mean?
Yeah, yeah.
Like I feel like
I don't think hers was on the trends. I mean, this is all like, you know,
but we can't say definitively,
vocabulary.
right?
Yeah, we can't say. But for me, it was more with sexuality. But she did struggle with her gender a lot, and we'll get into that in episode 5 because there's a really great scene that I want to refer to. And she did do a lot of like not experimenting with observing her own body and her own anatomy, because I think she did feel like something was wrong. She was born in kind of the wrong body, and she didn't like to be penetrated during sex. Like, she didn't like to be womanized during sex. So she did have some gender dysmorphia, but to the degree we can't really be sure.
Yeah, exactly. So it's the sort of thing where it's like, oh, today, would she have identified as non-binary? Would she have identified as, you know, a very masculine, mask of center woman? You know, the sort of thing where it's like, it's so ambiguous because she did not have the vocabulary for herself. And honestly, today we're still figuring out the vocabulary as a society.
Yeah, for sure.
And, you know, queer people all over the world are like finding the words for themselves now. And so I just think it was a super interesting thing that, of course, like, you know, these things don't always intersect in queer women, but like they definitely do a lot of the time. And I just thought it was interesting that to consider a remarkable individual for one of these things and not the other, and to have that commemorated initially. And obviously now it's changed. Like the plaque, I think, absolutely says where she lived with her wife or something to that effect.
It acknowledges her sexuality.
Oh yeah, so should we move ahead to Sister Fight?
Yeah, oh God, I love this one. And I thought this was improv. No, it is like word for word of the script, so props to Sally Rainwright, because I thought maybe this was improv, because that's what Gemma Whelan's background is, and I know Saran Jones can improv too, so I thought this was like improv. It's not, it's like word for word in the script, so well done.
Yeah, no, this was like so good as someone who has a sister. Sort of fighting, you know, it starts in a very reasonable place, and her aunt very much tries to be the peacemaker, being like, and her dad are very much like, well, you know, it was late. It would have been nice to know, you know, because there are like people robbing people out here in these streets, the rough streets of Halifax.
That fantastic flashback where she's like in the bar, like smoking and playing cards.
Oh,
I love that flashback.
So good. And then she sits there like ashamed. She goes, "Good Lord, that was a while since." That was so funny. Where she just like, and it's clearly like this is her young days of being out here and just being like trying to be like one of the guys.
I want more like low pony Anne that wears pants all the time. Like I want more like Anne in her early 20s. The
chain smoking where everyone stands up. Like all the men of the regiment like stand up when they see her father come in. And then she is like
he's in the
trying to
military
stub
too.
out. Yeah, he's in the military too, and he's like of higher rank than they are. And so they all stand up for their commander, and she's just trying to stub out the cigarette and like and not be caught smoking. It's the most teenage thing ever. I just thought that was so funny. But I like it was interesting because Marian, you see, actually has a lot more of like a socially progressive bent to her, where that she's like, you know, these people work for us, you know, as a courtesy, you know, I was about to send them out, but also we're keeping them up all night and they couldn't, you know, go do what they had to do. You know, you should apologize to them. And Anne was like, I'm not apologizing to my own servants, to the people I pay to serve me. No, ma'am. Mm-hmm. Which, I mean, again, kind of gets to, you know, for all her progressiveness with regards to, you know, herself and understanding, you know, certain things and certain factors, you know.
Yeah, she was very transgressive in one aspect and then antiquated in another.
Or
It's very interesting. She's
just
very much
of
like
her
a dichotomy.
time. Yeah, just very much of her.
Yeah. Well,
Of
not
that
really, because I mean, at
hierarchical.
that time you were coming into one of like a workers' kind of revolution too. So I mean,
Yeah, it's true.
I think the majority of the population were pro workers' rights, and then she was just kind of sitting back, didn't want that to
She's
change,
good.
but at the
Like
same time was living
Marian.
this very like transgressive life as like a
Yeah.
lesbian and like somebody that played with the gender binary.
Yeah, and I think that's a super important thing that, as you know, that we acknowledge in that we are getting to the point of understanding in our society of like how people can be not presuming that because someone is very forward looking in one area, one socially oriented area, that they're, you know, their intentions match all around. You know what I mean? That their agendas are all, if you're progressive in one way, that does not mean you're progressive in all
Oh, absolutely
things
not.
that you care about.
There's
Just
like
because,
gay people that love Trump, so like
oh,
there's
totally. You know, they're, you know, gay people who do not care about like, you know, not even queer women, just like women. There's like a lot of misogyny, or misogynoir, you know, and racism in the, you know, in the queer community for sure. And um, I thought that was a very important thing to underscore. And that Sally Wainwright, I very much appreciate, does not try to paint her with a too heroic of a brush, if that makes sense.
yeah,
But
which is true about her too. She was a bit of a
True.
snob.
Yeah, which is absolutely true. And it's nice to see that, like, in Marian being a little more like, hey, these are people, you know? Yes, they work for us. Yes, they are significantly, you know, worse off, but like, you know, they're whole human beings. And so this manifests into a fight, but it gets at the undercurrent of like Marian feeling like this house is half hers, which it definitely was not. And Anne has the point. It's like, it was not left to you. It was left to me and only me. Our uncle made the choices that he made. And she does throw a look to her dad as she says this.
Yeah.
And then it escalates to Marian being like, you know what? I'm going to get married and then I'm going to have a child. And then this child will have a better claim than yours will. And she like literally stands up. She's like so sick of her. I was so sick of Anne just being so snide and so sorry. And she like looks at her and is like, oh, aren't you getting like, and she implies like that she's like an old maid to Marian, which is like not cool. But she knows it's 100% the thing is like, I know I can imply this hurtful thing. She's not going for the kill here, but she's definitely saying something like, I know this is a sore spot and I'm hitting it and I don't care because you've
and then Marian just like, screw this, I'm leaving.
Oh, she was like,
packs her bags and heads on.
She's like, you're not going to get married right now, are you? And she's like, are you going to give birth just to spite me? Was like the line that took me out. And I will say Marian does come through with almost a checkmate where she goes, and she's like, oh, good luck finding a guy who's, Anna's like, good luck finding a guy who's, you know, good enough to father a lister. And she's like, the kid won't be a lister, you know? And Anne just sits there like, huh, well, got me there. And then like snips her teeth, which I thought that was such a funny end to that scene. And then it becomes an abrupt and not fun not a jump cut, but like a cutaway to, and finding Bad Dad Sowden day drunk on the job.
Yeah.
Which I'm like, if you're going to be look, I love a bottomless brunch. And all this to say, like, you could be out in the heat, you know, and I'm not making light. I'm like, he's clearly like an alcoholic or something to that effect. And it's like, how, like, being like, you know, having a good day buzz, but he's out in the heat lifting things. How are you doing that in the heat, dude? You're not.
He's a functional alcoholic.
Yeah, he's like absolutely. Like I'm like he's like function. I'm like I don't understand how he's this like functional to do a job like that. But then she somehow. What is the thing that tips her off that he's been drinking? Is he like saying stuff?
I don't know. I think it's just like his attitude and like his demeanor. Also, I think she just kind of hates him too. So
she doesn't. Yeah, she definitely has no love for him. But she's like, "Are you?" And she like talks to his supervisor first, and the guy's like trying not to snitch on him and just be like, "Oh, you know, I don't know." And she's like, let him go for the day. He's clearly not in his right mind. He's like, we kind of need the cart. And she's like, you know what? Someone else has a cart. Give them 2 extra pounds or whatever if they let me, or 2 extra shillings if they let us have it for the day. Get rid of it. And then that's where it turns nasty. And she's like, you need to go home. I don't want to fall out with you a second time after the awkwardness with the rent, where you tried to play her on that a couple episodes ago in the pilot. And he then starts getting really like, oh, let me see your, basically like, show us your cock. You're not a woman. You walk around here like you're a woman, but you're not. This really gross, threatening, like to the point where, but all the other men around her, like who obviously know the authority she holds over them and their livelihood.
She owns like all their property. She could kick them off in like 2 seconds
at any moment. And so, which is why his Lil Sowden is like, nope, getting him out, taking him home right now. And is like, he dumps him at home and is like, I'm taking the car. I'm going back. We're not losing a day's worth of money. But just because
and then there's that, like, he beats them and they get in a fight, and then he ends up in the pig pen.
Yep, so they tie him up.
He's like so gross, but I know we know how the episode ends. I kind of almost wish he had stayed around a little bit longer, because I think they could have done more drama with him and Ann Lister, and just like, I wouldn't want her to get, I think they could have done more there, but that's my thought.
I don't know, I feel like they did all of that they kind of needed to do, because I didn't need to see him like hit his like wife whose leg like doesn't work anymore, you know what I mean? And have him like abuse his kid. Like, I feel like I've seen enough of that to get the point personally. And I will say this about Sally Rayner: she's not gratuitous with violence. The violence that is in there,
she's not gratuitous with anything.
She's not gratuitous with anything, with sex or violence, which is a thing that, like, having watched a lot of Game of Thrones in a very short period of time, I very much appreciate. And like, and having watched like a lot of True Blood and a lot of other, like, the Tudors, the Borgias, all that, like, it's nice to see where it's like enough for the story to progress and to not be like squeaky clean, but not so much that you're being numb to it or that it's like terribly triggering. You know what I mean?
All right, we're recording again.
All right.
So let's just do that again.
Yeah. So a quick, just a quick little aside here. We're actually recording everything from here on out about a week later, just because the previous podcast service, which will remain nameless, lost the back half of my audio file from episode 3. And so we're just picking up where we left off in the second half of the episode. So if anything sounds a little different, that's why, just as a FYI. So back where
technical difficulties.
Yeah, truly. And so picking up where we left off, we're back in the chaumière with the 2 lesbians. And Kelsey had some notes about this makeout.
Yeah, it's so cute because they're just like eager to be with each other. They're like, they're all like 2 teenagers in love. They just like,
they are.
The second they get where they can, second they can get alone, it's just like make out sesh time.
Oh, 100%. And especially Ann Walker has never kissed anyone before, so she's like, hell yeah, let's go.
Yeah. And as far as she's concerned, they walk in like, the next night is when Anne's supposed to come over, so. Or that night. I think it's that night. She was supposed to come over, so she was like, this was like pre-gaming for the big night.
But then Anne is very much like, oh, so my aunt is sick, and then Marian, I got into like a tiff, whatever, so dumb, sorry babe, can't stay the night, but we'll have other nights. And Ann Walker's chill about it.
She was like, I can stay a little while though. Wink, wink, nudge, nudge.
Well, she does reveal a slander letter that she's gotten a la Downton Abbey style, where she's like, oh, someone anonymously wrote these really like crazy things about you not being, an upright person and like taking advantage of women. And it's like, but I don't buy into it. So who is the lady Edith that you think said it?
Like, I mean, I definitely think it was one of the Rawsons.
Potentially, but they seemed so surprised in episode 4 that they were so, spoiler alert for episode 4, that Ann Lister had gotten so close to Ann Walker. They are genuinely shook when old baddie Rawson.
But who knew at this point? I mean,
yeah.
Well, Mrs. Stansfield Rawson, the one that visited at the beginning of this episode, the beginning of this episode, or the beginning of the last episode one, they knew that they were hanging out. So, and obviously, like, Catherine Rawson got that info from somebody. I guess it was her mom. So I'm thinking it was one of them. Like, I don't think it was Catherine or Delia. They seemed pretty chill. I think it might have been her mom's, Mrs. Stansfield Rawson. I don't know what her actual name is.
I feel like that'd be really weird because I feel like Anne should know whose handwriting that is if it's someone in her family or in her circle. But the fact she's like, I just got this random letter.
Well, they wrote it in print, and nobody back then wrote in print. So I think that was a way to disguise their handwriting. Because everybody wrote in cursive back then, right?
You really could get away with anything if you just did things slightly different. That's the thing I think about all the time when I think about period dramas, like how super easy murder is to get away with. Spoiler alert for later in this episode. Where it's like, as long as no one as long as no one sees you do it, you're pretty much in the clear. 99% of the time.
I don't think fingerprints were really a thing, and we know DNA testing was literally 100 years away from actually being a thing, 150 years. So, I mean, yeah, you could do whatever you wanted to. Nobody would know. So it's always been secret letter.
What a time to be alive, let me tell you.
But I do love Anne's response. Like, she said, I don't care. I just want you to know that I got this letter. And they do that cute, finger touch thing.
Yeah, I love it. Look, I will say 19th century period dramas, 100%. They always do a hand touch. It's just, pinkies a lot. Even in straight romances, I'm like, I love this as a thing. I don't know why.
I saw it on Twitter. Somebody tweeted a GIF of them doing the finger touch in that scene, and it was this is how lesbians have sex. And I was like,
I think you definitely shared me on that tweet.
Yeah.
I
think I showed it to you and Megan at a restaurant when I was in New York. I'm pretty sure I did.
Almost certainly.
Yeah.
which she is not caught up on the show yet. I think she's on episode 2 or 3. She watches TV.
She's at least watching
eventually
it now.
She'll listen to this and hear us roasting her. But which means I have a good 6 months of lead time before she is able to listen to recap shows on it. So hi, babe. But also this is a scene where we kind of get a proposal, a totally decent proposal, where Ann Lister's kind of if you don't want to get married, and I sure as hell don't want to get married, why don't we take a little sacrament and then just move in together and just merge our finances and be together forever. And it's
she literally brought a U-Haul to the first date.
She really did.
In pure lesbian fashion.
Truly. She looked, and Ann Walker, to her credit, takes it very serious, and she's so you're kind of proposing to me, kind of a marriage, but obviously not in the legal sense, in a way that would be recognized by the church and by the state, but kind of a pledge to each other. And then Lister's yeah. And so she's well, I kind of want to, let me think about it. And so Anne's kind of taken aback for the first time. She did not expect her to say that at all. And I just thought she's well, this is a marriage. Let me give it as much serious consideration as I would give a marriage proposal. And I thought that was very beautiful, and that was very sweet and very considerate. Not only I would rather think about it and get back to you in 6 months rather than say yes to something now and bail on it. And that is 100%, I think, Ann Lister of all people should appreciate. And she does. She does in the scene.
On April the 3rd, I think, which is her birthday, which that makes her what? What does that make her? April 3rd?
Aries.
Does she track?
Does she track? Let me tell you, we're going to do, at some point, I'm going to try and do her chart. I'm going to save that for a bonus episode after we finish the season where I try to do all the characters' charts. or make assumptions and speculate wildly in the case of the minor characters who definitely do not have their births documented.
Because the time of day they're born is important, right?
If you're doing risings, which I do, it is, but the planets only move so fast. So I normally just put noon if I don't know. Gotcha. So yeah. So this is totally a thing that we will dive into later in the astrology of these characters, and also the, what I would imagine some of the characters, what their signs are, and how that shapes their relationships. And so, yeah, so Anne Walker is very honest about, like, I don't really want to marry a man. Like, I definitely don't want to give birth, but I would like to, have children in some capacity. Like, she's like, I love children, but I don't need to have them come from me per se, as long as I can be. And like, her sister has kids and she's very fond, and she's made a point of saying how fond she is of her sister's her kids, her niece and nephews. And then they, things heat up a little more. And then we do see Anne express a moment of, whoa, wait, let's slow down. Let's take this a bit slower. And basically tells her no. And I don't know. This was something that obviously we read into more, and we know that she does have a history of, being violated in that way. Not by a woman, by the character Mr. Ainsworth, who is her friend's husband, which we'll get into a lot more in episode 4. And, we'll definitely put a content warning at the top of that episode for anyone who shows talking about things of that nature and does not want to hear about it. 100% understandable. We will give you a heads up onto that. And honestly, over the next few minutes of this discussion, you may want to maybe skip a minute or two ahead if that bothers you. But that is the sort of thing where it kind of is a thing that may be meant to foreshadow her assault, but also it could just be a thing where, in terms of as someone who, again, was very romantically and sexually inexperienced at age 29, any sort of contact is a big deal, especially in the 19th century, where that is 100% meant to be in the bounds of a heteronormative marriage. And, if it's supposed to be a very official thing, and it's not necessarily meant for female pleasure. So I also kind of read into it in a moment of her just being anxious about that as well. When I first saw this episode, before I knew about Mr. Ainsworth, I interpreted that as oh, I'm just not ready yet.
Yeah, there's actually really good. Now I'll take a minute to read something from the script. There's a really good line after, basically, when Anne's working her way up Anne's leg through her, as she said in the diary, and they use it in the script a lot. I've noticed as I've been reading the script. It says, Anne Walker's getting increasingly aroused, but perhaps it's when Anne's hand gets right inside the thick knitted drawers and touches the quote unquote hair and skin of queer, as Anne put it. And basically, the part where she's like, wait, stop, and she's like, sorry, what? Anne's freaked. She's getting sexually aroused by another woman, and it's just not normal. So she gets kind of...
It is her, queer sexual awakening, and also her sexual awakening generally, from what we're meant to believe in the context of the show. So it's it's a lot for her to process. Yeah.
And there's a really great line that got cut where basically Anne Lister's saying, it's okay, you're not disappointing me. And Anne Walker's like, I've never done it before. I'm probably not very good at it. And Anne Lister, this is the line that got cut, which I hate that they did because that's so good. It says, the best way I imagine is to let nature guide you. So it's just saying, don't be scared. Just let what you're feeling happen. But it's not in a way that she's trying to get her to continue to have sex. It's just it's very
go at your own pace.
In mind. Yeah, go at your own pace.
Yeah. Which is very beautiful. I kind of wish we had gotten that moment too. But I don't know why it got cut. But. No, I feel I do. I feel they did cut it because in the next scene that we see them in, I guess I'm going to jump ahead and we'll circle back to Bad Dad Sowden's fate in a second. But when she doesn't that's why Anne sends that distress letter to Anne Walker. Sorry, I realize you can't just say first names sometimes. Anne Walker sends that distress letter to Anne Lister, and she's like, comes over and she's like crying in a corner. It's like, I thought you wouldn't come back because I couldn't give you what you wanted. I feel like to have Anne be tender to her in that moment would detract the tension leading up to that next scene, if that makes sense.
Well, I think she was tender in the previous scene, and I wrote like on my notes that this is a really good example of what consent looks like.
Yeah,
like, you can stop. Somebody says no, like you can stop and like be understanding and realize like, okay, it's not happening tonight, but I can she respects the feelings enough to stop.
But also, sort of thing. It's the only decent thing to do is when someone's like, not today, not yet, whatever, to immediately, nope, retreat. But Anne was very sweet about it.
Yeah, but for that time though, women were taught that if a man wants it, you have to give it to him. So it was normally like, it didn't matter if you wanted to do it or not. If your husband,
yes,
sex, yeah. If a man wanted sex, that's what you had to give him, and it wasn't like
it was your wifely duty. But for her, obviously, it is not a relationship that is looked at within those bounds. Yeah, it is a relationship.
Definitely what people are taught about it, though.
Oh, totally. But I think the liberating thing for being in a queer relationship and in the time, as funny as it is to say, because they had no rights to each other's property, in things of that nature. They had no freedoms except for they were free of as much as you could be, the sort of expectations of this is what a man does, this is what a woman does between two women. They kind of could make their own rules within that, and even though Anne Lister, speaks about like, a lot is like, I want a wife, I want a home, I want these very conventional, what the equivalent of the white picket fence would be for that time period, if that makes sense. She, is definitely open to appreciating her partner as her own force of nature and as her own person. And, as we see power about a man, right? In certain moments where I'm like, that is a dynamic that she appreciates. She loves Anne Walker's fire when she gets to see it. And which is something that, who's to say a man of the period, like most men of the period, that would not necessarily be the most desirable trait.
Yeah.
In terms of what the expectation of a 19th century wife, Christian English, was supposed to be.
But in the background, you have John Booth, going to the wrong house and starting up the gossip mill with Eliza Priestley, who flash forward into the next scene is going to cause a little bit of trouble.
So he goes to the wrong house and is like, I'm here for Miss Lister. And they're like, Miss Lister's not here. Oh, you know what? I know where she is. And so they go in. First of all, let me say this servant, Anne Lister servants are real ones. Anne Walker servants are not. They do not make any noise. They don't give her any warning, but they hear, kikiing on the couch. And he's just like, must be fine. Let's just fling open the doors. And lo and behold, she walks right in and catches them.
Well, no, James tried to say that like she's in there with Miss Lister, don't go in there. But then Eliza just opened the door. She just like barged in.
Oh, that's right. But he led her right to.
Oh yeah, he didn't do a lot, but he wasn't like opening the door. She just kind of like pushed past him.
Yeah, that's true.
Remember, he was like he was going to knock,
and she was like,
no, don't knock.
Yeah,
and I've showed you the version of the version of that scene without the music. They're loud, so like you can hear them through the door. So there's that, and then also I want to reference that tweet I sent you that we got robbed of Anne Walker sitting on Anne Lister's knee and them like making out like properly, like open mouth.
Oh,
kiss. Sent you that GIF on Twitter. Yeah, we got robbed of that. Somebody found that. It was the BBC's like preview trailer for episode 4. So like, when you start the episode, and it's like in last week's episode.
Yeah.
It was in one of those.
So someone cut the trailer before the final episode was cut. Or they didn't. Yeah.
Or they just wanted to add it to be scintillating, because that was in the diary. It said that I got like Ann Walker on my knee. That's like from the diary. On that day, she like got her to sit on her knee, and they made out, and then other stuff happened.
Well, the other stuff definitely does happen, because after her cousin comes in and is just like, like, gross, no homo, I'm mad, I defended you, Ann Lister. What you're doing is like what does she call it? Not unholy. She says
they're playing with fire.
Yeah, she says they're playing with fire, and has a whole like huff, and then Ann Walker just bursts into laughter, and I'm like, they really are like a pair of horny. They're a pair of horny teenagers, because that is like, what else can you do in that situation but laugh? Or like, well, that's not true. For Ann Walker, and Ann Lister like looks at her like agog when she sees this laughter coming out of this woman, because she totally expected her to be shamed and to immediately, this is a woman who was crying on the floor 10 minutes ago, and so here she is just like, oh, this is hilarious, just like, well, and then she turns to her and goes, do you want to go upstairs? And they go upstairs, and
then again, Ann Lister being extra. I told you, I've talked about this several times in this episode. Looking over the shoulder, the checking around for stuff. It's like she, she's around the center. She's like looking around, but Ann Walker just like woo. But Ann Lister's like looking around to make sure nobody's watching and everything.
And that's like a very real thing of like, not necessarily in this context, but like being mindful of, even in the most PG sense, where you show PDA as a queer person. Like I was helping my girlfriend look at apartments not too long ago, and there were definitely like moments where I would just be like, oh, go for like a quick like hi kiss, and she would like immediately like turn around, like, no, someone's here. I'm like, oh, yep, you're right, we have no idea who this potential landlord is, what they are about, how they feel. Or she's like, oh, this is my friend. And I'd be like, oh, yeah, you know what? Fair. I'm like, it's the sort of thing where I'm like, need to know basis. There are like things like that where you have to be like, and I live in New York City. I live in, if not the gayest place on earth, top 10.
Top 10.
And it's the sort of thing where, and also like as women being mindful of where you show affection, because like the potential for it to be fetishized, especially since me and my girlfriend are both very feminine presenting. It's like a struggle where you're like, oh, I just want to be myself. Like, and just, you see couples on the street holding hands and doing stuff all the time. But there are certain like settings and locations that like my natural impulse will be like something utterly like innocuous. And they'll just be like, oh, nope, never mind. I don't actually know these people. This is not a situation where I would want to like, put either of us at risk, not just because I don't know who this person is. And that's the thing. But I will say, especially for that time period where the stakes were what they were, Ann Lister being experienced enough to be the one looking over her shoulder, whereas Ann Walker is just carried away in the moment.
I did want to say, though, I forgot to mention it, in Ann Lister's journal, when this happened, because this did happen, Eliza Priestley did walk in on them, this is true. There was a moment in the journals, Ann Lister wrote that she thought that part of the reason Eliza Priestley overreacted is that she was jealous of Ann Walker and the attention she was getting from Ann Lister. That was Ann Lister's theory of the situation, but she's kind of known for like
just a little bit of an egomaniac.
Yeah, a little bit. But yeah, in the journal, she wrote that she figured some of it was jealousy.
I am mostly sure that was 100% not the case. It's the sort of thing where it's like people read into it. It's like, oh, this person's real homophobic. They must be like closeted or like super repressed or, whatever. And I'm like, maybe yes, sometimes, but more often than not, they just don't like gay people, like, or bi people or pan people, whatever. It's usually out of more bigotry than, a convoluted reason that they have, lesbian envy. I don't know. I feel like, and also for this,
and what she wrote her diary.
Yeah, and I was like, Anne, girl, come on. But I will say that level of self-love and self-esteem, Lizzo would be proud.
It served her well.
Yeah, I mean, it did. She walked around with BDE, and she knew who she was. And in that moment, so Eliza Priestley vacates. The ladies have a very tender. I will say, like, in terms of the sex scenes, like, this is not nearly as I don't even know if I'm going to say raunchy. Graphic, I guess is the word, as the one cutaway we've seen in the second episode. It's nothing like that. It's not male gazy at all in the way that you think of like Game of Thrones or True Blood or something like that. It's, if anything, extremely female gazy, where it's like these women are very mindful of, comfort with each other. It's like the pillows are moved to like support your back and like things like that, where it's like, oh, this is not a thing that's meant to be, it's not even really meant to be hot, I think, in a sense. Like, it is in that it's so tender, you know what I mean? And it's so earned.
I liked it, but it was just because it was so smooth. Like the whole pillow move. I remember seeing that and I was like, that was some attention to detail, because that wasn't in the script. That was added on set as a directorial.
Probably by an intimacy coordinator.
Ida O'Brien was their an intimacy coordinator on set. She probably added that. But I was just like, that pillow, such a nice touch, man. It's so true to something Ann Lister probably would do, just to be like that,
But it's also the sort of thing, like, it is satisfying. I was going to say an emotional climax. I'm like, no. It is so satisfying because we've seen this such, like, 3 episodes is not the slowest burn in the world, but it's not super fast. And it's certainly not fast for like an HBO show. But it's the sort of thing where it's like, we've seen enough of who these characters are, what they value, what they want, and that there is genuine affection and emotional intimacy there. And so this moment feels, I guess, earned in a way. So it's satisfying in a sense that it's like, yes, this is a thing we've been waiting to see for a while. You know what I mean?
That smirk when she like, how do I
family friendly, knows her in a biblical sense.
When they become, here we go, when they become connected.
There we go.
Smirk.
I like that.
Smirk. I was like, it is so cocky, but she knows what she's doing too.
Yeah, she's been around. She's like 12 years older.
Yeah, a lot of lesbians have said that's like very true to the experience. That's satisfying, knowing that you're giving that to somebody else. Is like, it's really authentic to the lesbian sex experience.
Well, also just most people pride themselves on being able to do that for their partner, being good, like good in bed, but more so like being able to give their partner a fun and safe experience. You know what I mean?
Back then, it was a skill set because they had a lot of layers to work through. They had like the dress, the petticoats, and the drawers,
like 5 layers of underwear.
Yeah, it was like there's a slit in the drawer, so once you got up there, it was easy access. But getting to that point, it was like layers and layers of stuff.
Peeing must have been such a logistical nightmare in this time period.
Yeah, that's what that's for. It was for them to use the bathroom without having to get completely undressed. Otherwise, they would have.
Oh no.
It's like, I don't know.
This was not for me, this time period. I mean, I'm a Black, like, queer woman and all, but like just the logistics, I'm just like, it's too much work. Ain't nobody got time for that. I guess they did have time for that because they had nothing else to do. They didn't have jobs or anything. I guess everyone did have enough time for that.
I know, I mean, but easy access underwear sounds like a fun time. But you had to work for it. I think it adds to Ann Lister's skill because she made fast work of it.
To segue into something significantly less sexy, we don't kink shame on this podcast, but I will if you are turned on by what happens to Bad Dad Sowden. Please seek help.
I mean, it was intercut with that sex scene. It was very jarring. It's like we go from, them being connected, as you would say, to,
Well, someone's head no longer being connected to their shoulders. So,
yeah.
so Before she leaves to go to Crow's Nest, Ann Lister sends along the message to her servants, let Lil Sowden know that she's swinging by the house to talk about their contract, and she's sick of Bad Dad Sowden drunkenness, insubordination, being gross and weird. Generally, she's like, I'm sick of it, but I'm going to pay you a house visit as a courtesy because you've been on my land for a long time. Let's talk this out. So Lil Sowden goes home. He's like, oh, shoot. Okay, I need my dad to be sober and to act right. Otherwise, our whole family's going to be thrown off this land. So he goes and he tries to reason with him. And he's like, literally, I'm giving you one last chance. Will you behave yourself and not get us thrown off this land? And the dad can't even fake it for like 10 seconds. He like tries to fight him, and he's still tied to the chair in the pig pen, and then face plants in the dirt. And Lil Sowden's like, you know what? The one useful thing you taught me is that pigs will eat literally anything. And then he slits his throat and kills him. Because he's basically like, look, it's literally my abusive dad or my entire family. And he's like, in this instance, I'm going with us. Slits his throat, looks back at the pigs, and the music starts to swell as juxtaposed with this very tender scene of lovemaking. And it's beautiful. The light in that scene is so beautiful. It's like so like late afternoon, like pre-golden hour, that like warm sunniness. Yeah. In a room that's like and it's very Ann Walker, that room. It's like so pink and so pastel and so ornate. It's like a true, like what you think of like in a wealthy 19th century like home and bedroom. It's just so lush and plush and gorgeous. So it's cut between these two women, like smiling at each other, like tenderly, and these pigs in this disgusting pen and a guy bleeding out. And that's episode 3.
At least it does end on their faces, and I love the swell of that music.
Yeah.
At the end, but yeah, that was my favorite frame of the episode too. Was them in bed post coitus.
Oh, it was so sweet.
That's my favorite frame for the episode. Oh, show.
Oh yeah. So should we go to favorite? So that was your favorite shot of the episode.
Yeah.
My favorite one, I guess it's also still a bit of dialogue, but the scene where Ann Walker's like, sorry, when they're in the chaumiere and it's like late shortly after the totally decent proposal, Ann Walker is like, oh, I'm sorry, I've never done this before. And Lister's like, me neither. And then she looks directly into the camera, and Ann Walker goes, what are you looking at? And she goes, nothing. Which
was unscripted. Sophie Rundle added that as a joke in rehearsals, and they're like, we like it, so we'll keep it.
Oh, 100%. That was the right call. Yeah, that was so funny. Yeah. But also the light in that scene is also like, I'm a sucker for anything shot by like firelight that looks like really beautiful and has that like warm, like very cinematic glow that is so nice. And so many of those scenes have that in the chaumiere. But this one was very nice, very nicely shot. My favorite scene for dialogue, which again, this is kind of cheating because the other scene was a dialogue scene. The fight with Marian, where she goes, where Marian gets up from the table. She's like done with Anne's nonsense. And she goes, and Ann Lister goes, you're not going to get married right now, are you? And then Marian like walks away and is just like blustering and like furious. And then Anne like can't resist. So you're going to give birth just to spite me. And I'm like, that's too good. I'm like, whoever wrote this absolutely has a sister or has been close to
Sally Wainwright
sisters. Sally Wainwright like has either like witnessed a lot of sisterly relationships, or she has a relationship with her sister or sisters. Because I'm like, that is spot on levels of spite and like just that repartee where it just goes back and forth. I love that scene so much.
That's apparently like her claim to fame as a writer, is really being able to hit dialogue right between characters. And like
she does
a lot about it through dialogue and like relationships through dialogue. I've noticed that's like her kind of trademark. She's written a bunch of other stuff in the UK, not really anything for the United States, but several other shows, and Saran Jones has been in several of them. Hence why she's in this drama with her. And then my favorite line of dialogue is the scene with Aunt Anne, where she's saying, nature played a cruel trick on me. And she's talking about, like, basically her issues with her gender. And, she's talking about how you have to take risks in life, otherwise you're not going to be happy. And that was the first time, I talked about it earlier, that I felt really seen by this show and realized it was going to have a bigger impact on me than just any other show I've watched with, like, a lesbian couple. I've watched a bunch.
You watched every single one.
Yeah, I have watched them all. I'm trying to catch Carrie up.
How did you vote?
That was my favorite one.
Quick segue. How hard was the auto straddle Emmys for you? Because this is all your favorites. Like, for me, I only had a couple of ones that were, when it was like One Day at a Time, Pit Against Gentleman Jack, that was hard for me. But I'm like, this is 100% of your TV.
I don't watch One Day at a Time, but Gentleman Jack and Winona Earp and Killing Eve against each other was, like, painful. Because I love those 3 shows so much.
Oh, man. You must have been agonized. But then also I was sitting there, I was like, I haven't seen Pose yet, but I want to vote for the people in Pose. But then also I want to vote for, like, I want to vote for Stephanie Beatriz in Brooklyn Nine-Nine for everything. I was like, why are you making me choose? Like, this is so hard. And I'm like, I'm like, Kelsey must be dying. Like, these are too many of your hard.
Too many of your I don't know the result. I know that Kat Burrell from Winona Earp won, like, best out, because she came out as bisexual this year. She got best, like, out actress in a sci-fi series or something.
Yeah, Stephanie Beatriz, I think, got best out actress in a comedy. She is a bisexual woman playing a bisexual woman in Brooklyn Nine-Nine. Prop and costume of the episode. Well, this is more of a guest star. I was going to say Chris Rawson's dog sitting on that really nice wooden antique chair where he goes in to talk to his lawyer. It was so good.
Trash man, cute dog.
That dog, yes, trash man, cute dog. I was like, oh, look at this little dog just sitting there. I'm like, oh, my favorite. Also, the old-timey lighter. I forget what scene it was. Oh, the old-timey lighter in the scene where they cut to Ann Lister in her smoking days when she was kicking it with the regiment. That was super cool as a prop of the episode. But my favorite costume piece is Ann Walker's weird mosquito netting over the full puffy sleeves of that pink dress when they first go to the Love Shack. That took me out. I was like, literally, we were watching the episode together, and I was like, literally, what is the purpose of this mosquito netting? What does it do?
See, mine is Ann Lister's cravat. The way she toys with it when she's with Aunt Anne, it's like a weird, like, sexy flex. I just like it. And then just the way she, like, has such mastery over it when she takes it off when they're about to, like, go to town at the end of the episode. That was just, her mastery with her cravat is just, it's a great little detail that I really like.
It's really, it's a powerful costume piece, let me tell you.
All right, thank you guys for listening to the episode. We really appreciate you tuning in again, and we'll see you this time next week. Oh, and thanks for being patient, because this episode was a few days late. So thank you for being patient as we dealt with our technical difficulties. And you can follow us online. I'm on all social media platforms at the Kelsey P. Jones. Feel free to follow me.
On Twitter, I am at _I am living color, and on Instagram, I am at I am living color.
Be cool. All right, we'll see you guys next week. Bye.
Woo! Stay gay.
I want to thank you guys again for listening to this week's podcast. Follow us online at Jack the Last Pod on Facebook, Twitter, and on Instagram. And check us out online at jackthelastpodcast.com. Jack the Last the Podcast is a Bad Hipster Kid production, produced, edited, and narrated by Kelsey P. Jones
and Carrie Pierce.
Music is by Epidemic Sound.